Medea stands as one of the most complex and controversial figures in all of Greek mythology. Her story is a powerful tale of passion, betrayal, and terrible vengeance that has captivated audiences for thousands of years. She was a princess, a sorceress, and ultimately a woman driven to commit unspeakable acts by the man she loved, and who betrayed her. The legend of Medea continues to resonate today, because it explores the darkest depths of human emotion and the devastating consequences of broken promises. Her narrative has been retold countless times by ancient playwrights, historians, and modern artists, each interpretation adding new layers to this tragic character. To understand Medea, we must journey back to ancient Greece and examine her extraordinary life from beginning to end. Medea was born a princess of Colchis, an ancient kingdom located at the eastern edge of the Black Sea, in what is now the country of Georgia. Her father was King Aedes, a son of the sun god Helios himself. This divine heritage meant that Medea was not merely royalty, but had the blood of gods flowing through her veins. Her grandfather Helios was one of the titans who drove the chariot of the sun across the sky each day, bringing light to the world. This connection to divinity would prove significant throughout Medea's life, as she possessed supernatural abilities that set her apart from ordinary mortals. From an early age, Medea demonstrated remarkable talents in sorcery and the magical arts. She was a devotee of the goddess Hecate, the powerful deity associated with magic, witchcraft, necromancy, and crossroads. Hecate was often depicted carrying torches and accompanied by dogs, and she held dominion over the night and the mysteries of the unseen world. Under Hecate's guidance, Medea learned to prepare potent potions and spells. She could manipulate the natural world, heal the sick, rejuvenate the old, and even bring about death with her concoctions. Her knowledge of herbs and their properties was unmatched, and she understood the secret powers hidden within plants, roots, and flowers that grew in her homeland. Medea's abilities made her both respected and feared in Colchis. She was known throughout the kingdom as a formidable sorceress, whose powers rivaled those of the greatest magicians of the ancient world. The pivotal moment in Medea's life came with the arrival of Jason and the Argonauts to her father's kingdom. Jason was a Greek hero who had been sent on what seemed an impossible quest to retrieve the Golden Fleece, a magical ram's hide that hung in a sacred grove in Colchis, guarded by a sleepless dragon that never closed its eyes. The fleece had immense symbolic and practical value, and Jason's uncle Peleus had sent him on this dangerous mission, hoping the young man would never return. Peleus had usurped the throne that rightfully belonged to Jason's father and wanted to eliminate any threat to his power. Jason gathered the greatest heroes of Greece to join him on this expedition, including Hercules, Orpheus, Castor, and Pollux, and many others. They sailed on a magnificent ship called the Argo and became known as the Argonauts. When Jason arrived in Colchis and requested the Golden Fleece, King Aedes had no intention of simply handing over his kingdom's greatest treasure. Instead, he devised a series of seemingly impossible tasks that Jason would have to complete before he could claim the fleece. First, Jason would have to yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls with bronze hooves and plow a field with them. Then he would have to sow the field with dragon's teeth from which armed warriors would spring up and attack him. Finally, if he survived these ordeals, he would still have to face the sleepless dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece itself. King Aedes was confident that Jason would fail and die in the attempt like so many before him. But fate had other plans. When Medea first laid eyes on Jason, she was struck by his beauty and noble bearing. According to some versions of the myth, the goddess Aphrodite or her son Eros shot Medea with an arrow, causing her to fall desperately in love with the foreign hero. Other accounts suggest that the goddess Hera, who supported Jason's quest, influenced Medea's heart to ensure the hero's success. Regardless of divine intervention, Medea found herself consumed by passion for Jason, a man she had just met. This sudden, overwhelming love would change the course of her entire life and lead to both triumph and tragedy. Medea faced a terrible dilemma. Her love for Jason conflicted with her duty to her father and her homeland. She spent sleepless nights torn between these competing loyalties. Her heart urged her to help the handsome Greek hero, while her mind reminded her of the betrayal this would represent to her family and kingdom. The internal struggle was agonizing, but ultimately her love for Jason proved stronger than her filial obligations. She made the fateful decision to betray her father and help Jason succeed in his impossible tasks. In exchange, she made Jason promise to marry her and take her back to Greece with him. Jason readily agreed to these terms, knowing he could never succeed without her magical assistance. Medea provided Jason with a special ointment that would protect him from the fire-breathing bulls. When he rubbed this magical salve on his skin and weapons, he became invulnerable to flames and could withstand the intense heat of the bronze-hooved creatures. She also gave him instructions on how to defeat the warriors that would spring from the dragon's teeth. When Jason sowed the teeth in the plowed field, armed men emerged from the earth ready to attack him. But following Medea's advice, Jason threw a stone among them, which caused the warriors to fight each other instead of attacking him. They destroyed themselves in their confusion, leaving Jason unharmed. The final obstacle was the sleepless dragon that guarded the Golden Fleece. This serpent was enormous, with scales like armor and eyes that never closed in slumber. It coiled around the tree where the fleece hung and would kill anyone who approached. Medea accompanied Jason to the sacred grove, where she used her most powerful magic. She sang enchantments and sprinkled potions that caused the dragon to finally close its eyes and fall into a deep sleep for the first time in its existence, with the guardian neutralized. Jason was able to seize the Golden Fleece and claim his prize, but their troubles were far from over. King Eats was enraged when he discovered that Jason had succeeded through his daughter's treachery and magical aid. Medea and Jason had to flee Colchis immediately with the Golden Fleece, taking Medea's young brother Apsyrtus with them. King Eats and his forces pursued them, relentlessly determined to recover the fleece and punish the traitors. In one of the most horrifying acts of her life, Medea committed a crime that would haunt her forever to slow down her father's pursuit. She killed her own brother Apsyrtus. Some versions say she murdered him on the ship, while others claim she lured him to a meeting where Jason killed him. Either way, Medea then dismembered her brother's body and threw the pieces into the sea, knowing that her father would have to stop and collect them for proper burial. This gruesome act gave Jason and Medea the time they needed to escape, but it marked Medea as a kinslayer, one of the most terrible crimes in ancient Greek culture. The journey back to Greece was long and perilous. The Argonauts faced many dangers and challenges along the way. They had to navigate treacherous waters, avoid hostile kingdoms, and overcome various obstacles. Medea's magic proved invaluable throughout the voyage. She used her powers to protect the crew from harm and helped them survive encounters that would have destroyed ordinary sailors. During their travels, they stopped at the island of the sorceress Circe, who was actually Medea's aunt. Circe performed purification rituals to cleanse Medea of the blood guilt from killing her brother, though the stain of that crime would never fully leave her. When they finally reached Greece, Jason brought Medea to his homeland of Iolcus, where his uncle Peleus still ruled the throne that rightfully belonged to Jason's family. Jason wanted to reclaim his inheritance, but Peleus refused to step down voluntarily. Medea, once again, used her magical abilities to help her husband. She approached Peleus's daughters and demonstrated her power by cutting up an old ram, placing the pieces in a cauldron with special herbs, and bringing forth a young lamb. The daughters were amazed by this apparent rejuvenation. Medea then convinced them that they could restore their elderly father's youth in the same way. She gave them herbs and instructed them to cut up their father and place him in a boiling cauldron. But the herbs she provided had no magical properties, and when the daughters followed her instructions, they simply murdered their own father instead of rejuvenating him. This act accomplished Jason's goal of removing Peleus from power, but it also made Jason and Medea unwelcome in Iolcus. They were forced to flee once more. The couple eventually settled in Corinth, a prosperous Greek city, where they lived for several years, and Medea bore Jason 2 sons. Some accounts say they had 2 boys, while other versions mention additional children during this period. They appeared to have a stable family life. Medea devoted herself to raising their children, and Jason seemed content with his foreign wife, despite the fact that many Greeks viewed her with suspicion and prejudice because of her barbarian origins and her reputation as a sorceress. People of Corinth never fully accepted Medea as one of their own, and she remained an outsider in Greek society. For approximately 10 years, Medea and Jason lived together in Corinth, but then Jason made a decision that would prove catastrophic. He chose to abandon Medea and marry Glauce, the young daughter of King Creon of Corinth. This new marriage would give Jason political power, wealth, and legitimacy in Greek society. His children with Medea were considered illegitimate by Greek standards because Medea was a foreigner, and their marriage had not followed proper Greek customs. Jason rationalized his betrayal by claiming he was acting in the best interests of their children. By marrying into the royal family, he could secure their future and his own position. However, his justifications could not hide the fundamental truth. He was breaking his sacred vows to Medea, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. When Medea learned of Jason's plans, she was devastated. The man she had loved so completely that she betrayed her father, murdered her brother, and left her homeland was now casting her aside for a younger Greek bride. All of Medea's sacrifices and crimes had been for Jason, and now he was abandoning her as if she meant nothing. The pain of this betrayal was unbearable, and it quickly transformed into burning rage. King Creon, fearing Medea's reaction and her reputation as a dangerous sorceress, ordered, "Leave Corinth immediately and take her children with her." He gave her only one day to prepare for exile. Medea was about to lose not only her husband, but also her home and any security she had managed to build in this foreign land. Medea pleaded with Jason, reminding him of everything she had done for him. She had saved his life, enabled him to complete his quest, betrayed her own family, and committed terrible crimes all out of love for him. She had given up her homeland, her family, her identity, and her honor for his sake. And this was how he repaid her devotion. Jason remained unmoved by her arguments. He insisted that he was making a practical decision that would benefit everyone, including Medea and their children. He even had the audacity to suggest that Medea should be grateful for all the advantages she had gained by coming to Greece and living in a civilized society, rather than remaining in barbarian Colchis. His cold dismissal of her feelings and his refusal to acknowledge the depth of his betrayal pushed Medea past the breaking point. In her anguish and fury, Medea began to plot a terrible revenge. She would make Jason suffer. As she was suffering, she would destroy everything he valued and ensure that his new marriage brought him only grief rather than happiness. Medea was not a woman who accepted injustice passively. She had powerful magic at her disposal, and she would use it to exact vengeance on those who had wronged her. The sorceress began to formulate a plan that would punish not only Jason, but also his new bride and her father, who had ordered Medea's exile. Medea approached King Creon and begged him to allow her to stay in Corinth for just one more day to prepare for her departure and say goodbye to her children properly. Creon, despite his misgivings about her, agreed to this request. That single day was all Medea needed to set her plan in motion. She prepared a beautiful robe and a golden crown as wedding gifts for Gloss. But these items were infused with deadly poison. Using her knowledge of magical herbs and her skills as a sorceress, Medea created substances that would burn the flesh of anyone who touched them. The poison was designed to cause excruciating pain and certain death. Medea sent her children to deliver these gifts to the new bride, pretending to seek reconciliation and hoping to secure permission for the children to remain in Corinth. Gloss was delighted by the beautiful presents and immediately put on the robe and crown. The moment the poisoned items touched her skin, the deadly magic began to work. The poison burned through her flesh, causing unbearable agony. Gloss tried desperately to remove the robe, but it clung to her skin, and the more she struggled, the worse the burning became. Her screams of pain echoed through the palace when King Creon rushed to his daughter's aid and tried to help her remove the poisoned garments. The deadly substance affected him as well. Father and daughter died together in terrible suffering, their flesh consumed by Medea's magical poison. News of these deaths reached Medea quickly, and she knew she had little time before the people of Corinth would come for her, seeking vengeance. But her revenge was not yet complete. Medea now faced the most horrific decision of her life. She stood in her home looking at her two young sons, the children she had born and raised, and she contemplated an act so terrible that it defies comprehension. To truly hurt Jason, to destroy him completely, she would have to kill their children. This was the ultimate revenge, because Jason loved his sons and had justified his new marriage partly by claiming it would benefit them by taking their lives. Medea would ensure that Jason's betrayal gained him nothing but grief. Medea wrestled with this decision in her mind and heart. She loved her children. They were innocent of any wrongdoing and did not deserve to die, but her rage at Jason and her desire for complete revenge pushed her toward this unthinkable act. She also reasoned that the children would likely be killed by the angry Corinthians seeking vengeance for the deaths of Gloss and Creon. At least if she killed them herself, it would be a quicker death, and they would die by their mother's hand rather than at the hands of strangers. Some versions of the story suggest that Medea also wanted to prevent Jason from having any heirs or any remnant of their relationship to comfort him in his old age. In the most famous version of the myth written by the playwright Euripides, Medea ultimately decides to go through with this terrible act. She takes a sword, and despite her maternal love and her children's pleas for mercy, she kills both of her sons. This act represents the absolute extreme of revenge, a mother destroying her own children to punish their father. It is an act that horrifies audiences even today, because it violates the most fundamental bonds of human nature, the love between mother and child. Medea herself acknowledges the horror of what she is doing. Even as she commits the act, she is fully aware that she is destroying the being she loves most in the world, but her need for revenge has consumed her completely. After killing her children, Medea escapes from Corinth in a chariot, pulled by dragons sent by her grandfather, the sun god Helios. This divine intervention protects her from the vengeance of the Corinthians, and from Jason himself. When Jason arrives at Medea's house, hoping to save his children from the angry mob, he discovers that they are already dead, killed by their own mother. Medea appears above him in her dragon chariot, holding the bodies of their sons. Jason is devastated. He begs Medea to at least allow him to bury his children properly, but she refuses even this small comfort. She tells him that she will bury them herself in the temple of Hera, and that his betrayal has brought all this suffering upon him. Jason's life is completely destroyed. He has lost his new bride, his children, his reputation, and any hope of happiness. The Golden Fleece that he won with Medea's help seems meaningless now. Medea flees to Athens, where, according to legend, she receives sanctuary from King Aegeus, who had promised her protection in exchange. For using her magic to help him have children, she marries Aegeus and bears him a son. But even in Athens, her story continues to be troubled. When Aegeus's long-lost son Theseus arrives in Athens, Medea recognizes him, and fearing that he will displace her own son in the line of succession, she attempts to poison him. However, Theseus is recognized by his father at the last moment, and Medea is forced to flee Athens as well. Some versions of the myth say she eventually returned to Colchis, where she reconciled with her family and lived out her remaining years. The legend of Medea raises profound questions about justice, revenge, and the consequences of betrayal. Was Medea a victim driven to desperate acts by Jason's treachery? Or was she a monster who committed inexcusable crimes? The ancient Greeks themselves debated these questions. Euripides' play presents Medea as a complex character who is simultaneously sympathetic and horrifying. She has legitimate grievances against Jason, who used her and then discarded her without gratitude or compassion. Jason broke sacred vows and showed no regard for the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. In ancient Greek society, women had very limited power and options, especially foreign women like Medea, who had no family to protect her interests. When Jason abandoned her, she faced exile, poverty, and complete loss of status. Her revenge can be seen as the only form of power available to her in a society that gave her no legal recourse. On the other hand, Medea's actions are undeniably monstrous. She murders her own brother, an innocent bride, and her father, and most horrifically, her own children. These acts go beyond justified revenge into the realm of pure evil. No matter how great Jason's betrayal, nothing can excuse or justify the killing of innocent children. Medea herself acknowledges this in Euripides' play, admitting that she knows her actions are wrong even as she commits them. This self-awareness makes her crimes even more disturbing, because she is not acting in blind rage or temporary madness, but making a conscious choice to commit terrible acts. The story of Medea has fascinated artists, writers, and thinkers for over 2,000 years. Euripides' play Medea, first performed in 431 BC, remains one of the most powerful works of ancient Greek drama. It has been translated into countless languages and continues to be performed on stages around the world. The Roman poet Ovid included Medea's story in his Metamorphoses and wrote a now-lost tragedy about her. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, also version of the Medea story that emphasizes the psychological aspects of her character and her internal struggle. In modern times, Medea's story has been reinterpreted through various cultural and psychological lenses. Some feminist scholars have examined Medea as a woman trapped by patriarchal society, whose violent acts represent resistance against male power and the limitations placed on women. Others have analyzed the story through the lens of colonialism and cultural conflict, viewing Medea as a foreigner who never finds acceptance in Greek society, and whose otherness makes her both fascinating and threatening to the Greeks. Psychologists have studied Medea as a case study in extreme emotional responses to betrayal and abandonment. Her story illustrates how love can transform into hatred, and how the desire for revenge can override even the most fundamental human bonds. The character of Medea challenges simple moral categories. She cannot be easily dismissed as purely evil, nor can she be completely excused as a victim. Her complexity is what makes her story endure. She represents the darkest possibilities of human nature. What happens when love turns to hate, when loyalty is betrayed, when a person with power chooses to use it destructively? Her story serves as a warning about the consequences of betrayal and the dangers of revenge that goes too far at the same time. It evokes sympathy for a woman who was used, abandoned, and left with no good options, in a society that gave her no power or protection. Medea's divine heritage is also significant in understanding her character. She is not an ordinary mortal, but has the blood of gods in her veins and access to supernatural powers. This sets her apart from normal human limitations and expectations. The ancient Greeks believed that those with divine ancestry were capable of both greater achievements and greater crimes than ordinary people. Medea's actions, while shocking, are consistent with the behavior of many figures in Greek mythology who have divine connections. The gods themselves in Greek myths frequently commit acts of terrible revenge against those who offend them. Medea's vengeance against Jason mirrors the kind of punishment that Greek deities inflicted on mortals who broke oaths or showed disrespect. The theme of oath-breaking is central to Medea's story. Jason made sacred vows to Medea when she agreed to help him obtain the Golden Fleece. In ancient Greek culture, oaths were not taken lightly. They were considered binding contracts witnessed by the gods themselves. Breaking an oath was a serious offense that could bring divine punishment. Jason's betrayal of Medea was not just a personal failing, but a violation of sacred trust. This helps explain why Medea felt justified in taking such extreme revenge. She was not merely a spurned lover, but a woman whose partner had broken the most solemn promises possible. In doing so, Jason had shown that he had no honor and deserved to suffer the consequences. The Golden Fleece itself represents an interesting symbol in the story. Jason obtained this prize through Medea's help, but it brought him no lasting happiness or prosperity. The fleece was supposed to restore Jason to his rightful throne and bring him glory. Instead, his quest led to a series of tragedies, murders, exile, and ultimately the loss of everything he valued. This suggests that achievements gained through betrayal and the suffering of others cannot bring true fulfillment. Jason used Medea as a tool to accomplish his goals and then discarded her when she was no longer useful to him. The myth implies that such behavior inevitably leads to destruction. Medea's story also explores the position of women in ancient Greek society. Women in classical Greece had very limited rights and freedoms. They could not own property, participate in politics, or make important decisions about their own lives. They were expected to be obedient to their fathers, and then to their husbands. Foreign women like Medea had even less status and protection. Medea's extreme actions can be understood partly as a response to this powerlessness. When Jason abandons her, she faces complete destitution with no legal or social recourse. Her revenge is the only form of power available to her, the only way she can assert her will and make Jason pay for his betrayal. This does not excuse her actions, but it provides important context for understanding them. The image of Medea escaping in a chariot pulled by dragons is one of the most striking and memorable scenes in the myth. It emphasizes her supernatural nature and her connection to divine powers. While Jason is left on the ground powerless and destroyed, Medea rises above him literally and figuratively. She has taken control of her own fate. Even though the cost has been terrible, the dragons symbolize her otherness and her power. They mark her as someone who operates outside normal human limitations, someone who cannot be judged by ordinary standards. This ending denies Jason any form of closure or justice. He cannot punish Medea or even properly bury his children. He is left to live with the consequences of his actions, while Medea escapes to begin a new life elsewhere. Throughout history, different cultures and time periods have interpreted Medea's story in ways that reflect their own values and concerns. Ancient Greek audiences would have been particularly horrified by her status as a kinslayer, someone who murdered her own family members. This was considered one of the worst possible crimes in their society. Roman versions of the story often emphasized Medea's barbarian origins and portrayed her as an example of foreign corruption threatening Roman civilization. Medieval and Renaissance interpretations sometimes portrayed Medea as a witch or demon, emphasizing her magical powers and dangerous nature. Modern interpretations have been more likely to explore her psychological motivations and to see her as a complex, tragic figure rather than simply a villain. The tragedy of Medea lies in the fact that she had extraordinary gifts and potential. She was intelligent, powerful, loyal, and capable of great love. If Jason had honored his promises to her, she might have used her abilities for good. Instead, she was betrayed and abandoned, which transformed her love into hatred and her power into a tool of destruction. The myth suggests that betrayal can corrupt even the noblest character, and that broken promises can have catastrophic consequences. Medea's story is a warning about the importance of keeping faith with those who trust us and about the terrible price of betrayal. In conclusion, the legend of Medea remains one of the most powerful and disturbing stories from Greek mythology. It explores themes of love, betrayal, revenge, and the limits of human behavior. Medea herself is neither purely victim nor purely villain, but a complex character whose actions arise from a combination of justified grievance and excessive vengeance. Her story has resonated across millennia because it touches on fundamental human experiences and emotions: the pain of betrayal, the desire for revenge, the conflict between reason and passion, and the question of how far someone might go when pushed to their limits. Medea's tale continues to challenge and fascinate us, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the consequences of our choices. Her name has become synonymous with extreme revenge, and her story serves as an eternal reminder that betrayal and broken promises can unleash forces that destroy everyone involved, leaving only grief and regret in their wake.